So, I'm sure all of you know about the baker who refused to bake a cake for a gay wedding. Well, this guy's back in the news because now apparently he refused to bake a cake for a transgender person. I think he's saying that they're targeting him. Look, this guy's got a huge target on his back. He went to the Supreme Court. Apparently the Supreme Court sided with him. I've got the story pulled up. First thing I want to do is I want to read through this and talk about the latest on what's going on. But I've got so many questions having to do with multiculturalism and religion and a lot of issues that I think a lot of people have the answers to. But first, let's start with the story. Jack Phillips is suing the state of Colorado in a case involving another discrimination allegation, this one by a transgender woman. So this story is from just the other day. The Christian baker whose refusal to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court is suing Colorado after the state ruled that he had discriminated against another customer, this time a transgender woman. In a lawsuit filed Tuesday, attorneys for the baker, Jack Phillips, who owns Masterpiece Cake Shop, claim that Colorado is on a crusade to crush him because of his religious beliefs. After Phillips defended himself all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and won, he thought Colorado's hostility toward his faith was over, the lawsuit states. He was wrong. Colorado has renewed its war against him by embarking on another attempt to prosecute him in direct conflict with the Supreme Court's ruling in his favor. This lawsuit is necessary to stop Colorado's continuing persecution of Phillips. The suit continues. The Supreme Court sided with Phillips in June in a 7-2 decision, saying legal proceedings in Colorado had shown a hostility toward the baker's religious views. However, the opinion was a narrow one, applying to the specific facts of the case only. The court did not rule on whether business owners can invoke religious objections to refuse service to LGBTQ people. I want to stop right here and mention something. I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of people seem to think that the word narrow ruling means like it was 5-4, like it was really close, like, oh, it was a narrow pass. No. This was a 7-2 decision, and it narrow because my understanding is that narrow means they didn't look at like broad issues pertaining to this cause, simply a very narrow set of facts, and determined, okay, you can't do this based on this like one thing. So narrow just simply means there may be something he did that was discriminatory and was wrong, but based on like one particular issue, they're saying, okay, that's my understanding, it could be wrong. But anyway, let's carry on. In a decision issued on June 28th, less than a month after the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, Colorado's Civil Rights Commission, the commission found probable cause that Phillips had discriminated against Autumn Scardina by refusing to make a cake celebrating, in her words, the 7th year anniversary of her transition from male to female. The refusal, the commission says, was based on Scardina's transgender status, adding a claim of discriminatory denial of full and equal enjoyment of a place of public accommodation has been established. The commission then went on to cite part of the Supreme Court's June 4 Masterpiece ruling to back up the commission's decision against Phillips. As asserted by the Supreme Court, it is unexceptional that Colorado law can protect gay persons just as it can protect other classes of individuals in acquiring whatever products and services they choose on the same terms and conditions are offered to other members of the public. All right, I got a lot of thoughts on this one. First, what people have said to me in the videos I've made in the past about this is that the baker isn't denying them service, he's denying them a custom service. The idea being that he had no problem baking a cake for a gay wedding, just he didn't want to put certain things on the cake, right? And so he had no problem selling them any of the cakes he already had, but they wanted a custom cake celebrating, homosexuality, which he didn't want to do. In this instance, I guess there's a similar argument, but I don't know what the full details are as to this transgender woman who tried to get a cake, but it's interesting that this was just someone celebrating the 7th anniversary of transition. This is very different, right? With the gay wedding. It seems like there was a gay couple that went to his bakery and said, we'd like a cake, and I don't think it was necessarily on purpose. I think they were genuinely seeking the services, and when they couldn't get it, they were probably angry and said it was discriminatory, filed the suit. But in my personal opinion, and I could be wrong because I never try to assume intent on other individuals, with the high profile of this bakery, you'd have to imagine that the transgender woman going in there and ordering a cake knew full well what they were doing. Now, Steven Crowder has a video that someone shared with me the other day where he went to a bunch of Muslim bakeries and tried to get gay wedding cakes made as well, and many of them refused. In his video, he says many of them really did. I think most of the bakeries had no problem making a cake for a gay wedding, but he found a lot of Muslim bakeries that refused to do it. And the argument is kind of, This guy has religious beliefs, and he doesn't want to partake in certain practices that he thinks are antithetical to his religion. The idea being that by making a custom cake, he is, sinning or in violation of his religion. I kind of err on the side of, I understand that you have a religious belief, but in a greater society, if you want to participate in public, if your business is operating in public on public roads with public infrastructure that's paid for by the taxpayers, maintained by taxpayers, it should be fair that you do have to provide your services to the entirety of the public because you receive public licensing and support. But there's limits. I understand my opinion isn't, I don't know, it's arguable because I never think I'm 100% sure on any of these issues. It's why I'm a journalist for the most part, and it's why a lot of people take issue with my videos because they're like, Tim's a fence sitter. And I'm like, yeah, man, I just don't think I'm smart enough to know exactly how this should be done. I don't want to say what this person should or shouldn't do definitively because there's so many different issues that we don't know how to draw a line between. My question yesterday was, in a multicultural society, do we allow people to live by an adherence to their own cultural beliefs, or must they be subjected to our cultural beliefs? So the idea is specifically, in the US, there are rules, like you must service people, you can't discriminate. But if someone's religion says that they shouldn't service this particular thing or engage in this behavior, does their culture supersede our culture? At what culture becomes dominant? Because the idea then is very simple. You can have multiculturalism insofar as one culture controls subcultures. And I don't mean subcultures in the traditional sense. I mean literally Muslim culture and religion and Islamic culture is dominant in many, many countries. In the US, it is not. In those countries, you can't do certain things you can do here, very simply. And you can do things there that you can't do here. If someone comes from Saudi Arabia to the United States, there's a ton of shit they can't do that they could do there. And we're going to say, no, that's not acceptable. However, if you went to a Muslim bakery and said, I would like a bacon cake. I want to, look, this is, I know it's probably not super common, but yes, bacon ice cream, bacon cakes, bacon frosting, it exists. People love bacon, and it's become this millennial gag thing where they put bacon on everything. So if you went to a Muslim bakery and said you wanted a cake with literally bacon wrapped around the sides and pigs on top dancing, could they say no to you because their religion forbids them to consume or to touch? Or I don't want to say I know for sure exactly how the religion functions, how Islam functions, but my understanding is that it is taboo to even touch pork in certain circumstances. Would that be okay? Now I feel like there's some sects of Islam that are probably going to be fine with it. But the reason I bring this up is, for one, I believe everyone does have a right to practice their religion, but there will come a point at which their religion comes into contact or must be stopped by our culture. The Bible, Abrahamic religions, Judaism and the Bible in the Old Testament, say that you should kill people. Yes, Leviticus is particularly brutal, but we're not going to let a religious person, cause harm against somebody. So then where do we draw the line? If it's this baker must service a gay wedding because the person is gay, does a Muslim baker have to engage in a practice that they don't agree with? Are we going to see an instance where someone sues a Muslim bakery for not wanting to bake a cake for a gay wedding? I'm curious as to why the focus is so heavily on Christians. It seems like, to me, Abrahamic religions are all relatively similar. I know that the Christians and the Muslims, in the more extreme factions of the two are at odds with each other, especially with what's going on in the Middle East and other countries. But in terms of a secular society, which is multicultural, we have seen very high profile cases, U.S. Supreme Court, of a Christian baker refusing to engage in activity, and the left says, hey, you can't do that. I'm curious as to why we don't see the same thing affecting other Abrahamic religions, like a Jewish bakery or a Muslim bakery. And it's not to say that I think there's anything wrong with the religious beliefs of these groups. It's just that there's a remnant of the old left from the 90s and the 2000s that were very opposed to religion. They were atheists, and they didn't like that tradition, like the Republicans from back then were opposed to gay marriage and things like this, so they're still fighting them. But at the same time, they're very supportive of Islam and Islamic faith, but we don't see them fighting these bakeries where, like I said, Steven Crowder went to a lot of bakeries that refused to do it. I think he said most of them were okay with it, and that's cool, but some of them weren't. So ultimately what it comes down to is, how do we draw a line in what rules these cultures have to abide by and what rules they don't have to abide by, right? If there's an anti-masking law in New York City, does a Muslim person have to take off their hijab or niqab or burqa or whatever they're wearing? I think there's a religious right to engage in certain practices, but the line is hard to find. If a baker must bake or I should say the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, but if the idea is you can't discriminate, then do we say the same to the Muslim bakery? If the idea is that the average citizen can't wear a mask in New York in public under the masquerade laws, we went through this during Occupy, it's like in a group of 3 or more you can't wear a mask, are they going to apply the same law to Muslims who cover their faces or wear a shroud or things like that? I don't know what the right answer is, because there's religious reasons people wear the things they do. And if the government is going to say it's discriminatory to tell someone to remove their headscarf or garment, then how could they tell a regular person they can't wear a mask? It then seems like there's special privileges granted to people based on what they believe, and all it would take then for someone to gain protections under the government is to claim they believe something. One of the arguments I've said to people is, so political class isn't protected in most jurisdictions. I believe in Washington, D.C. it is, for obvious reasons. It's a very political place. But what would happen if a Trump supporter claimed that they were a Trump follower and that they believed Trump was the Messiah? Could they be thrown out of a restaurant for their political beliefs if they claimed it was actually a religious belief? If people on 4chan are calling Trump the God Emperor, well, that's a religious term. They're calling him God and Emperor. It's both political and religious. And there are many countries that use religion in a political means, especially Islam. If someone believes that Trump is, the reincarnation of the Lord, can you throw them out of your establishment for believing that? At what point is someone's religion protected? It's all very confusing. And often what I say is that the more we try to protect everybody, the more we actually take protections away. Like we saw Brown University says anybody can identify as a person of color now. So those affirmative action protections are being stripped away. Look, I don't know what the answer is. I have a lot of questions. All I really want to know is, tell me the rules. Tell me the rules so that I know how not to transgress. I don't want to infringe on someone else's rights. I don't want them to infringe on mine. How do we draw that line? I really don't know, and I think that's why it's a constant battle of people trying to, look, there's precedent set, there's lawsuits, and we try and figure out what the best way to function is. So all I can say is, I wish nothing but peace and respect and dignity to all peoples of all faiths and all religions, all cultures, all identities, all nationalities, origins, etc. All I'm really hoping is to have a real conversation as to what should or shouldn't be. And this is where you come in, because you can hop in the comments and express your ideas. Because, I'm the product of multiculturalism to an extent, and I think I worked out just fine. If you look at South Korea, they hold pretty Western values, but again, the U.S. is heavily influential. When the communists came into the North, they influenced that. So I guess to an extent, both my different heritages are still derivative of Western culture. And maybe that's why it works. I don't know. But when you take more authoritarian cultures and religions, it's hard to find a balance. If a Christian who is American says he doesn't want to engage in this, and you tell him he has to, but then you're going to have other religions that are coming from more authoritative and fundamentalist countries, are you going to let them slide or tell them they have to abide by our rules? Let me know what you think. Stick around, I got a couple more videos coming up in just a few minutes.